Good evening, everybody. My name is Dobrava Czocher, and it's my huge honor to open this special event. And although I'm not a speaker, I believe that I can speak through this beautiful tool, which is cello. And for this special opening, I chose to present a piece called Voices. And of course, it's not a coincidence that I chose this one, because I also believe that we are here tonight because we believe in voice. We believe that it might be expressed through instrument, through human voice, but it gives some special communication between us. And yeah, I'm very honored to be here tonight, and I wish you to enjoy voices spoke through cello as through humans.
Your Excellencies, members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you to this evening's Nobel Prize Dialogue, it's my pleasure to introduce Maria Leptin, President of the European Research Council, and Anna Sostrom-Douargy, Acting Director of the Nobel Foundation. Please join me in welcoming them on stage.
Thank you, Adam, and a warm welcome to all of you that are here in the room and that are following us online. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Excellencies, Nobel Prize laureates and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, and friends and colleagues. I look very much forward to the discussion today. So we at the Nobel Prize, we want to stimulate an interest in science, literature and peace work, all in line with the vision of Alfred Nobel and his legacy for the benefit of humankind. And this that we are doing here today is part of a series of events that we are doing around the world. Last year in May, we held a Nobel Prize Summit in Washington, D.C. on a similar theme. It was on truth, trust, and hope. And we talked about how to protect the integrity of the information ecosystem and also the risks of mis- and disinformation with emerging new technologies. But we also talked about the trust in science and how important that is to understand our world. This year is a big year for elections and the future of democracy, where many citizens will be able to cast their votes. We know that AI-generated mis- and disinformation affects elections all around the world. So that is why we want to discuss democracy that we know is on decline. So we are here mainly for three reasons. For more than 100 years, the Nobel Prize have recognized and celebrated defenders of democracy. Two of them are with us here today, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa and Alexandra Matvichuk from the Center for Civil Liberties from Ukraine, and they will join us here on stage in just a few minutes. We also value science and fact-based worldviews, which in fact underpin good democracies. We need to stand up and protect science and facts. And for that, we have two wonderful science laureates here today with us, Sir Paul Nurse and Ben Feringa, who will do just that. And of course, the world clearly needs investment in basic and curiosity-driven research. And if we want to understand the world, but also, for example, if we want to understand how AI affects society. And in fact, the common denominator of all laureates from all prize categories is just curiosity and the urge to pose questions. So we are very, very happy to organize the Nobel Prize Dialogue in Brussels here today together with the European Research Council, an organization that, just like ours, cherish and promote basic and curiosity-driven research. So thank you so much for this collaboration, and I leave the word to you, Maria.
Thank you, Anna. We're hosted here this evening in this wonderful Beaux-Arts, Center for Arts, Literature, Music, Dance, in this gorgeous 1928 architecture by architect Victor Orta. I think it's a wonderfully apt location for this co-production with the Nobel Foundation, with whom, as Anna has just said, we share the interest in science. But as the president of the European Research Council, which is a funder for research, I want to stress something about science, and that is its cultural value. Science, too, is culture. But not only that, the ERC actually funds across the entire spectrum. So we also fund research on the arts and the humanities. And so I think, once again, this is an apt environment. And of course, the ERC also funds research on democracy and AI, which brings me to today's topic, the topic of democracy. I'm sure we all share the dismay about what, at least for me, was a surprising discovery over the last 10 years, that the stability of democracy, in which we trusted so much in the 90s, is beginning to fray, actually is fraying massively at the edges. It's not stable. And this is, again, as Anna has remarked, particularly important in this mega year of elections, which of course includes the EU elections in June. And many strands come together here this evening in this place. So first of all, again, the combination between Nobel and the ERC. We're very happy about this. We're also very happy that this should be happening under the Belgian presidency of the EU. So great to be here while Belgium holds the EU presidency. Some of you may have forgotten that the EU themselves is a Nobel laureate. The EU won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. We, the ERC, fund researchers in democracy, AI, and many other things, and indeed, many of the ERC researchers have gone on to win Nobel Prizes. So it all comes round. I want to stress that today we have these wonderful Nobel laureates that Anna has just mentioned. We also have other very eminent and interesting people. First and foremost, we will be joined by the Vice President of the European Commission, Vera Jourova, by Demis Hassabis, the CEO and founder of DeepMind, will be on a panel later, and 3 researchers who've been funded by the ERC and who will be telling you about the research, the actual facts that are a foundation of our future thinking and our current thinking of democracy. Michael Brutel, Emilia Kaspar, and Stefania Milan, who will be telling you about their research later on. So I think we're looking forward to a really exciting evening of insights. I at least am looking forward to it, and I hope you are, and that you will derive the inspiration and insights that you've come here for and that you're justified in expecting from this crowd. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So good evening. My name is Adam Smith, and it's my very great pleasure to be your guide to this evening's dialogue. As Anna and Maria have so nicely introduced, we have many threads to weave together and a particularly interesting group of participants. So we have a great deal to get through in the next 2 hours. And so my job alongside being your guide is also to be your timekeeper. Wish me luck. We're going to begin with a session called Defending Democracy, and as Anna said, that will feature Maria Ressa and Alexandra Matvichuk. To start it, Maria Ressa is going to give a brief talk. So as you know, Maria is 2021 Nobel Peace Laureate, and please welcome her now.
Of course I have to take a photo of you. So thank you so much, and I'm going to warn you, I'm running on an hour's sleep, so I'm going to talk really fast. I will try to keep the time. So my question to everyone today is, where do you find hope, right? We live in a world on fire. This is my 38th year as a journalist, and I've never lived through anything like it. Today, you will hear a lot more from Alexandra. Let me quickly go through, right, and you'll see this from my eyes, but you have heard the macro. We have half the world voting this year. In December 2021, I actually talked about an atom bomb blowing up in our information ecosystem and warned about 2024. Here we are. Everyone talks about AI. But AI is 70 years old, right? It's not that new. But what is new is computing power, and you will hear this from DeepMind, from Demise, who will be on a panel later on. That increased computing power has given it increased power, but right now, generative AI or artificial, generative AI may be more speculative than useful. Very narrow uses are incredible. But let me go through the two buckets that we've had, right? Social media, which we've lived with for a long time, and I'll show you what has happened to me. First, bottom-up social media attacks. If you are a woman or you are marginalized in the real world, you're further marginalized online on social media. Oh yeah, Facebook went down today. You do know that, right? Meta went down. So the first is social media. None of those problems have really been addressed, although every company will tell you they have. The second, generative AI, rolled out in November 2022. This thing of opportunity to unpredictable rewards, to quick repeatability, that's the way they design casinos, to keep you on slot machines. It is also the way social media is designed, right? It is in the design to addict you, mild addiction, because the goal is to keep us scrolling. Right? And what has happened? In May last year, the US Surgeon General actually said that all of the problems for our youth, right? Decreased attention spans, increased levels of sleeplessness, of suicide, of eating disorders, so many more, and he ended with this epidemic of loneliness. There's more. I won't inundate you with all the bad stuff right away, but, tribalism. We're living through it again. We've always had it, but it's never been as powerful as it is today, and it was really pushed by one algorithm chosen by these platforms. All of them use the friends of friends to grow. Meaning, in my country, when Rodrigo Duterte became president, right, we were still pretty much in the center, but in 2016, if you were pro-Duterte, you moved further right. If you were anti-Duterte, you moved further left. 2017, 2018, 2019, and the radicalization went with recommendation engine, right? Doxing, if these words are new, doxing, dogpiling, bullying, harassment, gendered disinformation. I just ran off a stage with Hillary Clinton on my way to Brussels, where we were talking about how the attacks on women are the first signs of the retreat of democracy. And then, of course, you've already heard the power shift in 2024. Do you have agency to vote for the person you want? When we know that up to 85% of who you vote for is not dependent on what you think, it's how you feel. Here's another part, right? You saw the first social media AI, the second generative AI. They both made the same mistake. We didn't learn a lesson because in social media, it wasn't anchored on facts. In fact, in 2018, MIT said that lies spread 6 times faster. That's 2018. And then now that Twitter is Elon Musk and it's called X, and he's fired the trust and safety teams, do lies only spread 6 times faster? In Manila, in the Philippines, if you lace it with fear, anger, hate, it spreads even faster. That leads to the tribalism. This is what I've lived through, and I'll quickly take you through it. This is the network that attacked journalists, women first, that attacked opposition politicians, women first, that attacked activists, women first. That's kind of fun. These are the types of attacks that I got, and I was receiving 90 hate messages per hour. Things like this, they're memes. The way I look, the way I sound. I have dry skin, eczema, so you can see they doctored the photos to make it look worse. Then this, sorry. It was sent to me by my mom, you know? Uh, the kind of dehumanization that we have is a prelude to violence as well, because online violence doesn't stay online. And you know, they called me scrotum face. They took it forward. That's Vove PH is a Facebook page, and you can see again what they did, right? 1,000 Cuts is the PBS film. You learn to develop a thick skin. But we got to keep going. There's scrotum face. You see? All right. Now, I just want to take you to, I'm not alone. Every woman in the public sphere has to, this is a UNESCO report from 2022, Global Trends in Online Violence. But 73%, this is an International Center for Journalists report, have experienced online abuse. 25% of those received threats of physical violence, and 20% of those led to real-world violence. Now I want to just quickly show you what's generative AI doing. You know, I keep getting attacked with these things, but I kind of like it in a weird way, because you get data. This we just published on Sunday. A Russian scam network took generative AI audio and then spliced it on an old video, an interview I did with Stephen Colbert in 2022. They spread it on Facebook, and they took out ads on Bing. Take a look.
Today, I want to share one of my big secrets. What helped me to become a successful person is to quickly jump into new opportunities without any hesitation. And right now, my #1 source of income is a new automated cryptocurrency trading program. This is the biggest opportunity I've seen in my entire life to make a big fortune quickly. You can invest 14,500 Philippine pesos and earn from 120,000 monthly without much labor. I urge everyone to check this out before the banks shut down this platform.
Did you know? Did you know that crypto is up at its highest point today, right? So there's that, but it came from this. I just want you to hear the original.
Never seen before, but the
This
same
is what I really
methodology.
said.
Bottom-up social media, lies, a fact, you know, becomes a lie, or a lie said a million times becomes a fact. Oh, right?
Okay, well, so crypto is now at its highest point. We're going to come out with a second investigative. In that report, you will see we traced the IP addresses. We took a look at the M1 ad network, a Russian scam network, things that were used for advertising that are now used for information operations. What did they put in place on the website that I was going to be arrested again, right? So is it commerce, or is it politics, or is it both? We're going to find out. So what we did, and I have negative now, I will quickly close with this. I've given up on big tech because I've had many years of this, and because of that, I was facing a century in jail, right? My company was clobbered. We spent millions on legal fees. So we built our own, a matrix protocol chat app for news organizations. This year and next year is not only democracy facing the cliff, it's an extinction event for digital news as well. So try, please, if you have iOS or Android, you have it. And let me leave with this one point. And it is something that we raised in the Nobel Summit. It was at the Nobel Peace Center where we launched the 10-point action plan. On a big picture, this is actually what we're after. This is what you should be demanding and you should be signing up on. We have to reclaim our rights. The first, stop surveillance for profit. You never gave permission to be cloned or to be manipulated. Demand your rights. Second, stop coded bias. If you are marginalized in the real world, you are further marginalized online. If you're in the global south, we not only are getting tech from the north or from China, but we are also the ones cleaning it up so you can use it. Third, the last, journalism is an antidote to tyranny, because the one thing that will never change, generative AI will never be able to tell you exactly what is happening in this room at this moment. at this time. Thank you.
No. Sure. Oh, take a seat there. And then we can move you along. Chat
Okay.
show stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Maria. So much to talk about, so little time. One thing is, you said you've given up on tech, and then you call for these changes at the end. Who should people demand make the changes? Who actually can do this?
Anyone who builds tech, right? The reason why we built our own tech now is because I have waited for, like 7 years, 8 years, for big tech, the people who had huge amounts of money to throw in, to actually do what's right as a gatekeeper to the public sphere. But what I realized when I was designing our tech, our Matrix Protocol chat app, is that, oh my Lord, our CTO would always say, Maria, personalize this, because that'll get more engagement. And I'll say, no, I want a public sphere, right? You know what they call a house where everyone has their own reality? It's called an insane asylum. We need a public sphere.
You also mentioned that 85% of why people vote is because of the way they feel.
Yes.
So disinformation and manipulation are a very big threat to democracy. But another threat to democracy is straightforwardly that people are disengaged with the whole democratic system. Their lives are getting worse. It's not working for them. So how do you, as a journalist, engage people who are essentially switching off from the mainstream?
It's why I'm not sleeping. You know, literally, I think this is it. This moment is incredibly critical for all of us. I hope, you know, when you leave tonight, that you will go and talk to your family and friends and act. How do I engage them as a journalist? The entire conference is about facts, but facts are really boring. And social media, actually, when it was rolled out, it's funny, the internet did this. In 2009, there was a book called The Cult of the Amateur. The Cult of the Amateur. We have scientists that you will hear from here. Will you find them boring? Will you find the facts boring? Yes, that's the answer. But what we try to do is to make you realize that when it matters, in order to make the right decision, we have to have a shared reality and we need to have the facts. So, as a journalist, I don't give up. I keep telling you you're being manipulated, but I feel like Cassandra and Sisyphus combined. But I still have hope. Because we must act. So, I just keep going.
Yep. But it's also the fiction is important, the narrative of the facts that ties the facts together and making that palatable and attractive. It's such a big part.
You know, that's what I've spent. Journalists have spent their lives, their careers, learning how to tell a good story, to hold your attention. And actually, the last time we did this in DC in May, we talked about form. We're beyond that with the tech. The tech is so manipulative that it literally hacks our biology, right? And the incredibly bad part is, it is the worst of human nature that we're wading through toxic sludge. It incites the worst of human nature. So one of the things I do try to do is to remind you, I still believe in the good, and I've seen some of the worst things in conflict situations. But human beings, humanity has always been inspirational. We have to remember that. We have to have hope. I didn't really answer your question about, yes, it's a perfect storm. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. But why is that? Is capitalism? There's your other problem, right? But we can't even begin to answer these questions if we do not have a shared reality, if we do not have the facts. I think it's time to relook, reinvent, And here's the most exciting part in all the nastiness I was saying. This is the time to create. We must create the world we want.
Well said. Thank you. Now, having 2 Nobel Peace Prizes in one session is an abundance of riches, but I want to bring Alexander Matvichuk on. If you'd move there, please welcome her. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Now, you head the Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine, founded in 2007 to promote human rights and democracy. And since the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and then the invasion in 2022, you've focused particularly on abuses of human rights in Russian-occupied territories. It is, if you like, the front line, perhaps, in the threat to democracy, with so many threats all over the world. How would you see it tying into this global effort to defend democracy?
When we speak about 2022, it's a year when half of population in the earth will go to election. But only 80% of people, according to the Freedom House reports, and I say the words only with some in sarcastic manner, live in non-free or partially free societies, which means that people who have really possibility for a free vote is a tiny minority. And the question is how it can happen, because if 80% of people live in not free and partially free society, this means that we are losing freedom. And the problem is not just in fact that in authoritarian countries, the space for freedom is shrinking to the size of the prison cell. The problem is that even in well-developed democracies, are forces putting into doubt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights gain weight. And there is a clear reason for it, because those generations who survived the Second World War gone, and current generations, they inherited democracy and human rights from their parents. They start to take freedom for granted. They became consumers of democratic systems. They start to look for freedom like a possibility to make a choice between cheeses in supermarket. But the truth is that freedom is very fragile. We can't attain human rights once and forever. We every day make our choice.
So what do you expect from people?
I'm a human rights lawyer, and I have been applying the law to defend people and human dignity for many years. But now I found myself in a situation when the law doesn't work, because Russian troops deliberately shelling residential buildings, churches, hospitals, and museums. They are attacking evacuation corridors. They torturing people in infiltration camps. They forcibly taking Ukrainian children to Russia. They are abducting, robbing, raping, and killing civilians in the occupied territories. And the entire UN system of peace and security can't stop it. But I know from my own experience that when you can't rely on the legal instruments, you can still rely on people, because people have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. And what I want to tell to people, that this war is not just a war between two states, Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And this war started not in February 2022, but in February 2014, when Ukraine obtained the chance for the democratic transition after the authoritarian regime collapsed due to revolution of dignity. And in order to stop us on this way, Russia invaded. So with this war, Putin attempts not just to punish Ukrainians for our democratic choice. He also wants to convince the entire world that freedom, democracy, and human rights are fake values because they couldn't protect you during the war. They want to convince that country with a strong military potential and nuclear weapons can break international order, can dictate its rules to entire international community, and even forcibly changed internationally recognized borders. And if Russia succeeds, it will encourage other authoritarian leaders in the world to do the same. And what I want to tell, that we are dealing with the formation of the whole authoritarian bloc. Because I live in Kiev, and my native city is constantly being shelled not just by Russian rockets, but also by Iranian drones. China helped Russia to import Western technologies critical to warfare. Syria voted for Russian General Assembly of UN. North Korea sent to Russia more than 1 million artillery shells. This is very different countries, but they have very common feature. All these regimes, they captured power in this country, have the same idea what a human being is. And they denied people in rights and freedoms. They see people like object of the control. Democracies, in opposite, they consider people, their rights and freedom, the highest value. And there is no way to negotiate it, because only existence of free world will provide a threat to autocrats, because they can lose their power. This means that if we not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further. And this means that if authoritarian countries support each other, democracies has to support each other even stronger. We now in very critical situation. Russia prepared for a long protective war, and only officially 40% of Russian budget will be spent to military expenses. While military support to Ukraine in the United States is blocked. Europe can't close the back door to bypass sanctions by Russia, and Putin recently, in his public interview, repeated the genocidal claims that Ukrainians do not exist. We need solidarity from democratic countries and from people who believe in democracy and freedom. And this solidarity has to be proactive.
Thank you. Thank you. I really want to make the most of this incredibly rare opportunity of having the two of you together. So, Maria, please feel free to talk to Alexandra.
Okay, so I think the question I would ask first you is, would you do what the Ukrainians are doing today to fight for democracy? Because that's the challenge we all face, right? In Ukraine, you literally are, it's a person-to-person battle. How? It's been years. How are you maintaining despite the odds?
Frankly speaking, it's very difficult to live during the large-scale war, because everything which you call normal life is ruined in one moment. And you live in total uncertainty. You can't plan not just your day, but your next several hours. You never know what will happen. And you live in constant fear for your beloved ones, because there is no safe place in Ukraine where you can hide from Russian rockets. But also, these dramatic times provide people an opportunity to express the best in us, to become the best version of what we are, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make difficult but right choices, and to help each other. Because when we help each other, when people literally risked their life to save others whom they never met before, in this exact moment you have this feeling, what does it mean to be a human?
Every time I see her, she always makes me cry, right? It started online in 2014, right? The attacks and the meta-narrative that was seeded to annex Crimea first in 2014, and then that same meta-narrative was used by Putin to invade Ukraine itself. What Ukrainians were actually ringing the alarm on the information warfare that was happening. Has it gotten better or worse?
This war have different dimensions, not just military one, but also informational dimension. And this dimension is very important because there are a lot of things which have no limitation in national borders. Freedom is such things, and information is such things. And now we see that not just in Ukraine, but here, in this country and other democratic countries, the battle is going, the battle for hearts and minds of people there. And when you have a truth as an instrument, it's not provide you a huge privilege, because as you mentioned before, lies spread 6 times quicker. This means that we need voice of millions of people in the world to stand for truth. Because if we lose this battle, we will find ourselves in a world which will be dangerous for everyone without any exception. And whether we are brave enough to admit it or not, this war has already crossed the borders of European Union. I know it because people started to recognize that the war is going on when the bombs falling on their heads. But lies, it's first symptoms of the bombs.
The picture you have both painted is pretty black. We have just under a minute each for me to ask you what gives you hope. Maria, can you go first?
Cassandra and Sisyphus combined, right? So first, know that when you elect an autocrat, and the Philippines has gone through electing Rodrigo Duterte, and then our next 6 years after we elected Ferdinand Marcos Jr. We were in hell, and now we're in purgatory. So that's kind of a good thing, right? It can get better, but it takes 6 months to collapse institutions of democracy. And the Philippines was an example. And when these leaders are elected democratically, they don't stay in their countries. They are creating, something we started calling kleptocracy, Inc. You see the Philippines as one. We're getting slightly better. And you see Ukraine as another, where citizens are forced to fight for what they believe. This is not staying in our countries. This is also coming for you. So vote well. But wait, last.
That wasn't terribly hopeful. I'm sorry.
Hope. We're still here, right? Look.
I know that not just in Ukraine, but in a lot of other countries, like in Iran, in Sudan, in Nicaragua, people are fighting for freedom and for democracy. And sometimes their efforts seem to have no sense because they face with enormous opposing power. But we Ukrainians know that we have to continue this fight honestly, because the history of humankind convincingly proved that when you have no other instruments, even just your words in your own position, it can make a significant difference. It's not a little. and a result, even unexpectedly, will be achieved. Every effort matters. We are all drops in the ocean.
Thank you.
Hope. Hope comes with action. So you have to act.
Maria, Alexandra, we'll see you again at the end of the program. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, follow that. The next session is entitled Decoding Democracy, and it features 3 researchers who are funded by the European Research Council. From LSE, we have Michael Brutter, who's Professor of Political Science. From the University of Ghent, we have Emily Caspar, who studies the science of decision-making. From the University of Amsterdam, we have Stefania Milan, who works on critical data analysis. And moderating this discussion, I'm delighted to announce that we have the Euronews European Affairs anchor, Maeve McMahon. So please welcome them all to stage.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that very kind introduction. I think we were all speechless watching that previous panel, so it's a very, very hard act to follow, but we will do our best and reflect really on what we have heard so far. We've heard what's at stake, and we're joined now by these fantastic academics who are working on these issues every day, going deep inside our minds, our brains, the data online, trying to figure out why these trends, why is the world as messed up, if you like, as it is. Well, as Adam says, my name is Maeve McMahon. I'm a reporter based here in Brussels, working for Euronews, reporting for over a decade now on the European Union, and of course, keeping a very close eye on those elections coming up in a couple of months in June. But we've heard as well today a lot about the elections taking place all across the world. And that's what this panel will focus on. What exactly is going through our minds when we go to the polls? And of course, what is the impact of the digital revolution having on people? So as Adam said, our 3 professors are of course recipients as well of European Research Council funding and been digging deep into all these issues. So the clock is ticking. We have 22 minutes together, so let's begin. Michael Brutter from France, Professor of Political Science at the London School of Economics and Director as well of the Electoral Psychology Observatory and the co-author of the book, Inside the Mind of a Voter. So that is my first question. What is inside our minds as we go to vote? Are we thinking about ourselves or are we thinking about the greater good?
Big questions, 22 minutes. If you were asking me how to engineer a bridge, everybody would be listening. The problem is that as you are asking me what goes on in the minds of people when they go to vote, many of the people in this room and many of the people watching us online will assume that they already know. And I have to start by thanking the European Research Council for funding people like us, because the science of the people, the science of the mind, is as complex as the science of the things. And when it comes to what goes on in the minds of people when they go to vote, we often assume that they will think about what's good for them. We often assume that they will think about who they want to represent them, what sort of policy they want to be taken in the country. But the reality is a lot more complex. And what we find in the research that Sarah Harrison and myself are doing at the Electoral Psychology Observatory is that when people go into the polling booth, when they're getting ready to cast their vote, they try to embrace a role. The first thing they think about is, what am I supposed to do here? You know, what's my role? How can I be a good citizen? And many people, and maybe that gives us a little bit of hope after the very difficult things that Maria and Alexandra talked about, I do think that most people try to be their best selves when they go inside a polling booth to cast a vote. They try to figure out how to be good citizens, how to do the right thing by their children and grandchildren, how to do the right thing by the rest of the community, and what the rest of the community wants from them.
But Michael, what triggers someone who perhaps all their life voted Labour and then suddenly they move to vote for the far right?
Well, I think that, first of all, one of the findings we have in our research is that about 20 to 30% of people make up or change their minds about how to vote within a week of the election, and half of them on election day. And when it comes to understanding what makes somebody decide to vote or not, or who to vote for, one of the problems that we face is that we think we know what democracy is about. Again, we think that it is about policy choices or representation. But increasingly, citizens have outgrown their democracy and want them to perform a whole range of different functions. They might want to signal that the system is not working. They might want to have a discussion with the rest of the citizens in their country. They might want to feel part of their community. They might want to feel listened to. They might want politicians to listen to them once every 4 or 5 years. And it's a mixture of all of those things which is going to make them decide who to vote for and whether to vote or not.
And that idea, Michael, that you mentioned there of feeling part of a community, that's part of your research, Emily Kaspar, at the University of Ghent, this tendency for human beings to create groups. Tell us about your research and also about the threat that polarization is having to democratic societies.
Yeah, thank you for the question, because, I mean, to live in a healthy democratic societies, we need to create and to enhance social cohesion. But for that, we need to stop separating people into groups. Human beings have this very famous tendency to just put people into cases, like by ethnicity, religion, nationality, whatever reasons. And we know from neuroscience research that it has deep impacts on the brain. The way your brain reacts when you consider someone as an out-group compared to your own in-group can influence your behaviors. For instance, there are brain regions associated with empathy that are less activated for the pain of others when you do not consider that they are part of it. And I think that to ensure that our societies can be more peaceful and that everyone can just be heard and have this feeling of belonging, we need to fight against this very basic and deeply ingrained biological process of separating people between each other. We have to make sure that all of them have the right position and can be heard in the same way.
But the reality, But the reality is, and you're probably observing this online, is that people are sticking to their same group. They're staying in their echo chamber. They're not listening to people that they don't get on with. And this is also proving to be problematic.
Yeah, in fact, what I miss in this picture is the power of data and the machines that thrive on data generation and circulation, which are platforms. And in fact, we have already heard Maria Ressa earlier saying it all. But really, what we are facing now is that the processes that you, Emily, are talking about are amplified and monetized by social media platforms that not only through data they describe our reality, but they also contribute to shape it, contribute to steer it, contribute to these in-group, out-group dynamics that we are talking about, make some reality real and some more realities desirable or more desirable than others. So in a way, we have platforms where we hang out, we spend a lot of time today, which tend to monetize, even not just amplify, but thrive on our worst behaviors.
And speaking of worst behavior, we're seeing a lot of very destructive social movements online. They can be whipped up extremely fast. We saw before Christmas, for example, riots in Dublin, in my home city over in Ireland. People gathering on Telegram, and within 2 days later, there was similar groups gathering on Telegram in Lyon, gimmicking what they'd seen in Ireland.
Yeah, well, social media, again, amplify our probably worst tendencies, for better and for worse. And the fact that you can mobilize so quickly is definitely unprecedented in the recent history of our world. To get a social movement, historically and still today, in fact, to have a social movement that is able to exert change, you need time. What happens on social media is instead of sort of mob-like behavior, when people are mobilized extremely fast, and what we call a movement, maybe sociologists might object, but it's something that moves, right? Moves very fast, rapidly grows, and equally rapidly decreases. But what happens in this case is that you're left with some debris, in a way, on the ground, right? But the good news, I think, just to try to steer the conversation also towards something a bit more positive, is that not all these debris, not all these leftovers of these rapid mobilizations are bad news for democracies. Sometimes think, for example, about Me Too. It also was boosted by social media and social media presence and content going viral. What we are left with is norm change. No one after that movement is able to speak in the same term, using the same terminology that they used to use right before that. So equally, so what is true is also that with movements that go rapidly up and rapidly down, we also have an acceleration of the process of norm change, which is actually positive for democracy. So not everything is lost.
Michael, would you agree with that? Because I know this idea of polarization in your research, you feel that that is something of the past. You don't sign up to that idea. You sign up to more this idea of hopelessness. Yes, yet anyone who's been reading the news today, for example, it's Super Tuesday over in the US, it's all about polarization. It's like the media has clung on to that word and just can't get rid of it.
Well, that's part of what I was telling you about what we think we know and should research a little bit more thoroughly, because the discourse is all about polarization. The parties, in a way, need and want polarization. Many institutions need and want polarization. The media likes to talk about polarization because it makes for very easy debates. But the people, in our view, and especially the young people, are no longer polarized, but more often hostile. The difference is that to be polarized, you very much dislike the people who do not believe like you, but you like the people who do believe like you. Young people nowadays are hostile, which means that they still dislike the people who don't believe like them, but they do no longer trust or like the people who even vote for the same party as them and have the same beliefs as them. And that creates very different problems for societies and very different problems for democracy. And the problem is all the harder that one of the things we find in our research is that this hostility is not really fueled by negative perceptions, in other words, disliking others, but negative mirror perceptions. In other words, everybody believes that the others dislike them. And this has a very disinhibiting effect because everybody feels that they are just defending themselves. And if you're defending yourself, there is no moral limit to what you can do to defend yourself. You're right? You're just trying to survive. And that transformation of polarization into hostility, especially among the younger communities, among younger people. And this shift from a problem of negative perceptions to a problem of negative mirror perceptions create challenges which, as democracies, we are not yet well equipped to deal with, and that's why the problems keep getting worse.
And Emily, just going deep inside our brains, what role is fear playing when we're voting?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, for this in-group, out-group identity, there are different brain mechanisms that are at play. And what I'm afraid of, personally, when I hear at political parties communicating before a big election, for instance, many of them, they use our natural fear towards others to gain more votes. They will directly target some minority group, and I'm sure, hate speech, of course, is forbidden by law, but it's not even necessary to trigger fears in the brain of people. I'm sure that if I ask the audience, okay, what we're thinking about when I say, oh, those people will steal your jobs, or those people will threat your well-being, or whatever, depending on the countries where we are from, we may all have this very automatic idea of what could be the target, what could be the minority that I would call into question. And when I'm looking at political debates in some countries, it's not hate speech. They will never use that. But they increase this group separation because they know it works, because they know that by playing with our inner fear of others, of out-group members, they will gain more votes. And I'm a bit afraid of that.
And not just politicians. In fact, if you take a look at the media landscape as well, Stefania, in countries like the United Kingdom, for example, you have very popular television channels like GB News, where you have the main anchor is the well-known Brexiteer, Nigel Farage, who was the head of the UKIP political group, normalising these topics. I mean, have you seen this trend, and what should be done about it?
I hear you.
We're talking about the media and how...
The question, I couldn't hear it.
Just when you're with your students every day and you're discussing these trends, what you're seeing, how the media is normalizing this kind of hate speech, if you like.
Yeah, the problem is that what we see online ends up legitimizing our inner bad selves in a way, right? So, and in the moment in which we see other people sharing the same fear, the same hatred, the same hostility, then this ends up alimenting our, and boosting really the in-group and out-group dimension that both of you, in fact, were talking about. Now, the good news is that we have regulations for these things. You mentioned hate speech regulation. It's much more difficult to regulate emotions. So I disagree, sorry, I agree with you when you say that polarization is probably a problem of the past, but we probably still have to stick to the idea of regulation, of polarization, because that's something that at least in a way or another is understandable to policymakers and to citizens alike.
And a little bit later, in fact, the European Commissioner for Values, Vera Jourova, will be up on stage. It's her job to try and regulate emotions or regulate all these things happening online. But Emily, you've had a very busy couple of weeks. You're just back from Rwanda. Talk to us about your work with genocide perpetrators and also rescuers. What can we learn from them? What lessons can be learned for our democracies?
Yeah, so it's true that my main topic of research is more about perpetrators of genocide. And what we learn also from the literature and from history is that actually many of those events, like I'm mentioning mostly genocides, but they most of the time occur in very authoritative systems, which are at the opposite side of democracies. And what I'm trying to do is what is happening in the brain of those people who suddenly will just decide to kill another part of the population, to murder, to massacre another part of the population. What are the phenomena that are at play? And honestly, most of the time I'm very depressed about human nature, but that's probably because I work with many of populations who have done such atrocities. But one of my main research questions, and I'm trying to have this from a very scientific point of view, is to understand why when people follow orders, follow the directives of some authoritative figures, how is that possible that their behaviors may change that well? And I'm studying the brain for this. And I indeed see that there are a lot of effects of following orders. You may have less empathy for others, you feel less guilty, you feel less responsibility for what is happening. But in all this, I have indeed, a week ago, initiated some new research with genocide rescuers. The rescuers, they're not as frequent as the perpetrators most of the time. They do exist, but they're very rare to find. And I'm very impressed, actually. 8 days ago, I met the first genocide rescuers in Rwanda ever. And for neuroscientists, this is something like exceptional. We never meet those populations most of the time, but you have so much to learn about them because instead of falling prey to hateful propaganda, to orders from an authoritative government, instead of just participating with the others to the mass killings, they have been able to say no. They have been able to just say, to save life, actually, even at their own risks. And I think we have so much to learn about them. I mean, when I hear of their stories, it's so full of humanity. And just to have a rebound with what you have just said, it's interesting because many of them actually report this feeling of shared humanity. For them, there is no groups. All human beings are the same, and that's what guides them in their rescue efforts and rescue actions. And actually, for me, even if they are not numerous, they trigger a lot of hope on the fact that people can find a way to fight and to act for the good.
Thank you so much. We'll keep an eye on your research. We've a couple of minutes left, and I'd like to talk now about artificial intelligence. As we heard in the previous panel, Maria Ressa said it's been around for decades. We just really haven't noticed. But of course, existing social media channels were already used, we've seen in the past, to manipulate elections. We could mention Brexit, we could mention Donald Trump. But do you think that with AI, we will see disinformation on steroids? Stefania.
Probably yes, it's quite likely, in the sense that it has become much easier and quicker to produce fakes of very good quality. So things that for which you needed more computational power, much more design and software development expertise, you can do it really comfortably from your sofa. And I hope you're not going to do it tonight, but it is indeed a possibility. Now, the other problem is also that through the same channels, we can also distribute things much, much faster. So potentially, yes, we are facing a much bigger problem than before, and we are in the same way in which we were ill-equipped to distinguish facts from fiction and emotions on social media. We are still ill-equipped today. Now, to put things into perspective, even when cinema became available to people, you probably remember those videos, actually, of people running out of the theater, the movie theater, when they saw a train coming at them. So let's try not to have the same reaction looking at this big, complex problem that AI is putting on our table, and try not to be like those people escaping, and try to see whether something can be done, both from the policy and the educational point of view.
And Michael, would you agree, and also in your findings, you say that we've outgrown our democracies, that they're no longer fit for purpose. Why? And what would be the alternative? And would it make our democracies more resilient against these threats?
Well, I mean, those are two very complementary questions. I mean, the resilience is important because increasingly our democracies are vulnerable to a lot of external threats: pandemics, environmental disasters, social media and artificial intelligence, potential attacks, terrorism, and so on. And the problem is that whenever those external threats appear, they increase inequality. And we need democracy to be really inclusive, because democracy only works if it's universal and if everyone is given a voice. But additionally, the reason why we citizens have outgrown democracy, and the reason why democracies are no longer fit for purpose, is that the whole point of democracy is to tell people, the system is yours. What do you want to use it for? And institutions were created largely on the basis of what we thought citizens would need in the 19th century, essentially. And now they've developed a whole range of new desires, new needs, and when they don't get those needs fulfilled, they feel, as Harrison would say, frustrated. Or worse, they can become hopeless. They become hopeless the moment they feel that it's not only they who are not getting what they need, but the children and grandchildren are no longer going to live better than they did.
And they feel like they're left outside the room. They feel like they're not being listened to.
And they feel that they are not being listened to and that they are inaudible, effectively. And to have a little bit of hope here, even though artificial intelligence is potentially a threat, it's also a wonderful opportunity for democracies to be better, because what citizens resent very much in democracies is that they don't control the questions they are being answering. And they have lots of opinions about things, and they want to talk about a lot of things. And if we can use technology in the right way, we can capture all that opinion that exists and make sure that people express it democratically rather than in disruptive ways.
So one idea could be for a round of applause for Michael. So one idea could be to bring a citizens' assembly, for example, into a European Council summit by virtual reality? No? Crazy idea?
No, because democracy needs to remain universal. The reason why deliberative democracy is not a solution is precisely because there is hostility and people do not trust others to represent them. We need something that brings everyone back in. The young people, they want to speak. Young people, they are the least likely to use internet voting or postal voting because they want, when they are going to vote, they want to come to the polling station. They want to experience the real thing. People with mental disabilities, mental health issues, they don't want to vote remotely either. They want to be treated like equal citizens. So what the solution can only bring everyone in the table again.
So they want to be physically in the room. We're running out of time, but do you want to weigh in there?
Yeah, the problem that we are facing is that technology is actually not going to solve this problem because platforms are not designed for democracy. So, well, I guess the conversation has to continue, but luckily we can leave the room and leave the real experts to solve it.
And the question is, do you take the battle for democracy onto the platforms where the audiences are? Because the reality is, and as we heard last night on this very stage as well in Beaux-Arts, when 5 MEPs discussed how they will try to galvanize voters ahead of those elections, they need to be on TikTok. And TikTok is, of course, the elephant in the room. But I'm going to have to leave it there. We have run out of time, but a very, very warm welcome to our professors, Emily Casper, Michael Pruter, and Stefania Milan for your fascinating interventions. And thank you so much to our audience. In just a couple of minutes, we'll be inviting up on stage again Maria Lepton. She'll be diving deeper into that topic of artificial intelligence that we just really scratched the surface of, all about the opportunities and the risks. But now it's time to invite up back on stage our cellist, Dobrava Chore. So enjoy.
So as Maeve mentioned, we now have a session focusing on the relationship between AI, science, and society. And once again, we have an extraordinary group of people we're bringing together. European Commission Vice President for Values and Transparency, Vera Jourova, the co-founder and CEO of Google DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, and 2 Nobel laureates in science, Paul Nurse, who's the 2001 Nobel laureate in medicine, and Ben Feringa, 2016 Nobel laureate in chemistry. Those 4 will be moderated by, as Maeve said, Maria Leptin. Please welcome them. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. We have a panel of 4 people here who've just been introduced and who you might feel will be hard to mesh in their interests and in their outlooks. But they're all very broad-minded and interesting. And what I would like to do first is to ask the 3 scientists, Demis, Paul, and Ben, to talk about how AI impacts on their own research. I'm sure this will be of interest to many in the audience to figure out what real, actual scientists actually do with AI in their research. And then I would like Vice President Jourova to say how AI impacts her work, which is a very different ballpark. And then in the second round, we'll see how these 2 fields influence each other, help each other, what they do for democracy and society. So, Demis, would you like to start talking about your own work?
Sure. So I've spent my whole life working on AI because I've always regarded it as potentially the ultimate tool for helping us to do science and accelerate scientific discovery. If you think about AI at sort of an abstract level, it's a system or a tool that can make sense of a lot of data, find patterns in a lot of data, find insights and structure in data. And a lot of what we do in science starts with that, and then you can build insights on top of that. And so for many, many years, AI has been developing. Of course, we're now at this incredible inflection point, and I think we're about to enter maybe the next 10 years, maybe a new golden era of scientific discovery, helped by AI in many, many fields. So at DeepMind, we've done a lot of work in biology, especially. Probably most well known is our program AlphaFold that pretty much solved the problem of protein folding. So trying to find the 3D structure of proteins just from its amino acid sequence, its genetic sequence. And that has all sorts of implications in drug discovery and disease understanding. And over the last couple of years, we've found the structures and predicted the structures of over 200 million proteins, pretty much every protein known to science, which would have taken many, actually millions of years of experimental work of time to do that number of proteins. So I think we're just sort of seeing a revolution in biology. I think it's going to apply to other areas too, like chemistry, material science, physics, and mathematics. I think all of these areas, scientific disciplines, will benefit from AI.
Right, we'll hear your thoughts about the risks and opportunities later. Paul, as a biologist.
Without any question, the biggest impact has been Demis Hassabis's AlphaFold. My lab has only worked in this area for a year or 2, and we use AlphaFold all the time. It's amazing. It allows you to predict, as you said, the 3-dimensional structure of proteins based on DNA structure. And why that's so important is people like us in my lab, amateurs, can actually use this information to turn sequences into biochemistry. It isn't always right, but it is sufficiently right to be a fantastic tool. So that's the main thing that's helped us. We use it in little ways. We can analyze images to predict how we can analyze data in the future. That's simple stuff by Demis's standards, but it's very useful for us. ChatGPT pretty hopeless for us, actually, if I may say. You know, what we get back is something like a middle quality, high students assessment of the area. Sorry about that, but that's what I think about it. But maybe it will get better. Maybe it will get better. And something that Demis said, which I just want to amplify on, what AI does is allows you to predict things. It doesn't necessarily allow you to actually understand things, but it is the first step in understanding. So it's very, very important, but we have to take it further.
Super. Ben, as a chemist.
Yes, I'm a chemist, and in the laboratory, you know, we design molecules and materials. Let me give you an example where we use AI. If you want to make a new pharmaceutical, a new drug to treat cancer, for instance, you need sometimes 35, 40 different chemical conversions, chemical steps to build, you know, to build like Lego, to build a molecule, a complex molecule that treats breast cancer, for instance. And to design these routes, there are hundreds or maybe thousands of possibilities, you know. So from all the collective information that we have in the chemical literature, yeah, and in the physical literature, we then use these programs to design routes. And then, of course, there's still the human factor to decide, are there new, better routes, you know, that are more easy to make at less steps, yeah? And can we make a drug easier, yeah, exactly needed for that specific target, you know? And that helps us a lot. Let me give you another example. Hair shampoo. Yeah, you're laughing. But that is, look at my colleague here, you know? That is a complex chemical problem. That is a complex... I didn't say that. That is a complex chemical and physical problem. You might not realize that. There are many, many parameters that make it a hair shampoo, and many different components. And to make that kind of shampoo, you know, when you talk with the big industry and so, it's a real difficult problem to make a good hair shampoo. Now, you can get all these data and train your computer what combinations you need. And then what we do is, then we train our robots, so we are now building robot systems in the lab. We feed this data to the robots. They do then selected experiments, so we don't have to do 1,000 experiments, but maybe only 100, and to get the right combination, you know, and to get the information that we need to make a good hair shampoo for you.
You'd never have thought that. Vice President Jourova.
Can you repeat the question, please? And good evening, by the way.
What does AI do for you in your work? Transparency, values, that's your portfolio. These are actually topics that we've talked about in other sessions today about AI, but this is your portfolio. What does AI do for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe one comment on what it means for me in private life. I asked my adult children whether they are ready for taking care of me, and they told me that they will buy avatar to do it. And I was a bit scared by that, and then it reflected in my job, because indeed, my job is values, transparency. It sounds abstract, but my job, in fact, is that all the achievements, all the human rights, equality, respect for human dignity, decency, that all that is projected into this new parallel world, in fact. And it was something I tried to do in case of the digital platforms. That I was really working with the big platforms over years to convince them that there should be no space for crime, and there should be no space for algorithms which just put the people into cages or bubbles, if you like. And it's similar with AI, because the technology is now having very, very quick start. We started to legislate as the Commission. It is the body which proposes legislation. We started to do something about it in 2018. We started with ethics standards. So something which was not legally binding, but rather some moral call. And then we proposed the first AI law for the whole EU in 2021. But in the meantime, ChatGPT came. and suddenly I saw how much true is that when I say that money and technology is always quicker than the law. We saw the speed of light. Suddenly ChatGPT invaded our lives. And so we had to reflect on it in that first law, which was still in the making. You know, we are sometimes very slow, but, well,
what about Paul's comment on what ChatGPT does for him in the lab, namely just sort of so-so stuff? Do you see the same, or is it actually valuable for?
I think it will get better, as Paul indicated, yeah, because it's learning. It's fascinating. It's learning. It might be a very, very useful tool. Also, we discuss with the journalists, with the media, whether AI and especially ChatGPT will destroy their work because they feel that their work has been stolen by AI. Yeah? And so we also have to take proper position on these new technological possibilities. But ChatGPT will definitely improve. And what you said, Mr. Professor, not about the shampoo, I have to think about it, but you mentioned collective information.
Yeah.
I would really like ChatGPT to contain collective wisdom. Yeah? And it's a little bit a different story.
Yes, wisdom, of course. Okay. Ben, do you want to respond directly?
We put in data that are based on sound scientific experiments. And ChatGPT, in the science at least, it's all based on the quality of data. So the American colleagues say, rubbish in, rubbish out. So if you put in good data, ChatGPT will use it. I don't know, the colleagues here can comment on it. It all depends upon how you train them, what quality of data you put in there. And then you can get a lot out. But indeed, also with the students, Paul was mentioning this, I see sometimes reports of my students, the Dutch students, the Belgian students in my group, or the Chinese students, and they use Oxford English words that I have never even seen. Fantastic. Now, then you know there is something wrong, you know, they just picked it from the ChatGPT.
Okay, you've already learned the tricks for detecting.
The tricks
very
to some
good.
extent, yes.
We don't even need AI to
but
detect
he can
AI.
comment on this.
Paul, I can
Not
see it now.
everything in Oxford is right.
Okay, all right.
I want ChatGPT with Spark. You understand?
Yeah.
Something a bit more lively, something a little bit more imaginative. And Demis is going to tell us how we can do that.
Well, Demis, actually, I mean, you know the risks, and as Ben was saying, perhaps in our research, where the training was on good, you know, verified data, they're less than in politics. But tell us a little bit about.
Maybe I can pick up on a few themes that have been mentioned by the other panelists. So, first of all, I think it's important to realize AI is much more than just the chatbots.
Yes.
So even though chatbots is what everyone's sort of gone crazy over, and maybe it's the way that the general public interacts with AI in a most visceral way. But I think a lot of the most interesting AI systems are actually different types of systems specialized for these scientific endeavors, things like AlphaFold. I think we're going to see a lot more of those types of systems. Just on the chatbots themselves, of course, we're all working on those systems as well. Our particular one's called Gemini. And this is a really important problem that Ben brought up that we have to fix if we want to ever use these chatbots for something more than, you know, your school homework. We've got to solve the factuality problem. And that's a core problem we have to solve with these AI systems in general, is to make sure they don't hallucinate and they stick to facts. And then I think they would be quite useful as a sort of, maybe like a research assistant level in terms of summarizing an area or a series of papers. And then the senior scientists and the scientists can then helps them make connections, maybe especially things like interdisciplinary science would become easier then, I think. So I think that's coming. It's not an easy problem, but maybe using it for science can help drive the research in these technologies in the right direction. So actually, we're working on a science large language model that could be like a research assistant and maybe help you predict things like the outcome of an experiment. You could imagine describing an experiment, and then maybe it gives you some view on that. So these sorts of things are coming maybe in the next few years. Yes. I think just to touch on another thing as well is, one of the things I think AI is generally useful for, if you abstract away from AlphaFold or the systems that we have, what they're really doing is, even the shampoo example you gave, is that you've got this huge combinatorial space of possibilities. Could be in chemistry, could be in mathematics, in physics, in biology, and you're trying to search like needle in a haystack, understand that space, whether it's chemistry or biology, understand the structure of that space, and then search in it to find the solution or a solution according to an objective function you have, and try and output that solution. That's what a lot of science boils down to. And any of those, if you can couch your problem in that way, then these types of AI systems that we're building now can be very useful for it.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there's huge potential there.
Thank you. So I want to get to another point. We've been in a number of other sessions today, and the risks were discussed, algorithms that are based on getting clicks through fear, hate, anger. You have to, and the mistrust in what comes out of anything AI, the large language models, the foundational models. Ben, how do you get your students to recognize whether what they spit out for your molecules that you want to test? How do you? Do they just run off and say, "This model says we should test this compound"?
This is a really important issue, of course, because you have to be careful. I'm very positive about the opportunities of AI and all these technologies, but a critical attitude is really crucial. So how do we train the people, to use this information, this data? And especially we are at the university scientists, we have to, the first and primary important thing is to train our students, our young people, to be critical, to think about what does it mean, yeah? On what data sets is this information, what is this analysis based? And then what is the output, ask critical questions. And I think this is crucial in the whole education process, to use these new technologies, etc. So once again, we should not be too afraid, but of course there is the danger, of all kinds of misinformation that you get, etc. It's even worse, I think, when you go to journalism and all this influencing the public opinion. But okay, I'm a scientist. Even there, we have to be very critical, What is the quality of, what does it tell you, and on what data is it based,
Yes. So is that useful for you, this idea that we have to, for Vera, that, again, values and transparency, that we need people to understand the limitations and ask critical questions?
Of course. Yes.
Is that important for democracy? Nobody's going to say no, but...
How many hours do we have to speak about what are all the things which are endangering democracy now? By the way, it was very interesting debate before here, so congratulations. There were some very, very interesting ideas which I want to steal already tomorrow in my tomorrow speech. But what I wanted to say, for me, is important to protect the autonomous critical thinking of each individual.
Yes.
Because what we witness in this digital era, that more and more there is a tendency to create a crowd, and individual people are disappearing. Sorry, I am a philosopher and lawyer, so I sometimes I'm not easy to understand, but we already saw it when we started to work on the data privacy protection. That I wanted each individual to be the master of his or her identity. And now it's similar with AI. When I work, I think about the person, the voter, the citizen, not a consumer, citizen, yes, who should still be able to recognize what is false and what is true. Because isn't in democracy and in democratic elections important that I, as a voter, understand that this is a real person speaking to me, he or she wants to be elected. He or she is promising me something, and that I don't see AI production. So, in other words, in our rules, which we are now testing in the EU, we have the rule that the AI text, or produced text, or image, or some video, once it is truly produced by AI, is labeled. That I, as the citizen, see this is the production of AI. And I think that this is important also before elections, maybe 10 days elections. We will see that even the platforms will be proactively and systematically remove deepfakes. Because this is what
Yes,
was
we
said
heard
here.
Maria Ressa talk about that
Disinformation
earlier
on
today.
steroids. This
Yes.
is exactly the situation. So now we have the commitment of all the big technological companies, except Twitter, now X, they are not friends with us. But we have the commitment that they will either label this production or remove it, so that the people can be sure that what they read, they know what they read and what they want to take as a inspiration for the elections. Without that, we will only see hidden manipulation. So then we can just forget about free and fair elections.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm glad I don't hear fear and anger there, but a rational approach. But Paul is forever an optimist.
Yes, I think we've got a real opportunity here, because in the past, if you wanted to look at a topic, you would go to the library, you would trawl through the journals, you would take days, maybe weeks to put things together, that these sorts of methods can produce in minutes. Now, frankly, that was rather dull, so reducing it to minutes is a good thing. But the second point I want to make, close to what Ben was saying, is that the next thing that's required is critical thinking. And we give time for the students and time for the researchers for critical thought. So the time we liberate from trawling through the library is then applied to critical thinking. That has educational consequences. We need to teach our students critical thinking.
Maybe even our kindergarten children already.
Yeah. But we also need, and this is just again to emphasize what you've heard, is the providence of the data that is used to generate this analysis has got to be good. And when Demis says you can do it in science, I'm encouraged by that, of course, because science on the whole is going to be more reliable. So I think there's a real opportunity there. The providence of the data matters. The second is the performance of the algorithms that are actually analyzing it. We have to really understand that so that we can ensure that they're going to work in the ways that we want. And the third thing is understanding what's going on. We can't just be stupid and just press the button on the computer. We have to understand what's going on.
Yes. Demis, do you want to comment on whether that's actually even possible for anyone other than you? Yeah. And what can you actually do and recommend to help people see these things critically?
I totally agree with what Paul and Ben said about critical thinking and actually hypothesis generation. These are all what the human scientists need to bring to the table and understanding. And then it's complementary to what I think these tools can do, which is a lot of the data gathering and sort of data analysis. So I totally 100% agree on that. I think in terms of like AI and democracy and what Vera was talking about, again, I think we can use AI as part of a solution if we're clever. So things like watermarking in a way, where, we work on this thing called synth ID, which uses AI to invisibly and imperceptibly watermark these images, these generated images, so that government and others and journalists can detect it, and then it can be flagged automatically. And it's hard to remove by a hacker or a bad actor. You know, so, and we can think of AI in defensive posture also maybe in cybersecurity, things like this. I think AI is going to be a very important tool for democracies to defend themselves. So I think there's that. I think also we've talked quite a lot about the risks, you know, but I think we should also think about the opportunities. I feel like democracies, you know, one of our strengths is our freedom to innovate and create, you know, incredible things, and that's what we do with our sciences, and I think AI can accelerate that, and can be, if we use it in the responsible way, I think it can help us with many of the challenges we're seeing facing society today, like our healthcare systems, making them more efficient, helping with climate change, new technologies, fusion, and other things where AI can be applied to help accelerate. And that will give us the prosperity in our democracies to then strengthen and make them more resilient. Yep. So I do think AI is, if we grasp that opportunity in the right way and we use it in the right way, could be an incredible strength for democracies to accelerate what we already do best, which is innovate and do science and discover new knowledge, including things like truth.
Ben, you, yes, Vera, you'll actually get the last word. You speak to children in schools. Do you see hope there, or do you see doom?
No.
Because doom is what we usually hear, the young people, etc.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I go to schools, elementary schools, high schools, and of course I teach students.
Actually, he also spends a lot of the income that he gets from shampoo making to support this. So it's really admirable.
When you go to elementary schools and you discuss with the kids, you know, the excitement, the creativity, you know, the eagerness to learn, it's absolutely overwhelming. But yes, it is there where we should start at early age, you know, to train our kids, our teachers, the students, everyone, as Paul said, asking questions. Science is all about questions. Knowledge is about asking questions to your teacher, asking questions to society, to Mother Nature, etc., and to have a critical attitude, and to enable them to distinguish what is valuable information. This is not always easy, you know, with all the information. We get a tsunami of information from internet. And I want to make a quote from the book of Harari, if you allow me. You know Noah Harari, who wrote about Homo Deus, the future of mankind? There's a beautiful quote. In the past, the power, this is also important for politicians, by the way. In the past, the power was with those who knew the information, who had access to information. In the future, the power will be those that know what they can neglect from all this flood of information and what is really valuable.
Yes. Very good, thank you. Vera. I'm not even going to ask you a question. I see you frantically taking notes. So, comments, please.
Okay, thank you very much. There is one more interesting quote of Harari, by the way. How to quote it, to be precise, that we are already creating an artificial intelligence without having beaten natural stupidity.
Yes, yes. But that was not in my comment.
And I was so sorry to read it because it was exactly my idea when I was standing in London in front of Winston Churchill's statue. One day before the conference in Langley, when we discussed also with China, by the way, and with the global leaders about the secure AI, I was thinking about this is exactly what Churchill would say about the natural stupidity of human beings. But you inspired me for a few comments. I think the task of today for the politicians, for the technologists, but also for the researchers, is to join forces and to make sure that AI will simply be useful for the people. It's such a simple task, and it will be difficult to do it. But I think that we are in the right moment to create some kind of permanent common work. And this is exactly what we are proposing when it comes to big models, the generative AI. Because what's happening up to now, it was some kind of dialogue between the world of technologies and technologists, big companies making big money on this, and politicians. the politicians complain that the others, the business side, wants to make more and more money without being responsible. And the technologists say that politicians are more and more ignorant. I will not repeat the word stupid, but that we don't understand. That's why it's so important that now we want to create some kind of triangle, technologists, politics or public sphere, and research. And the role of the research will be to test early on the new models, to be able to predict the consequences. Because all that is about prediction of consequences of something, we still don't know what it is.
Very good. Yeah. I'm actually, as the head of a research funding organization for fundamental blue sky research, I'm very happy to have you end on this note. Any more comments on fundamental blue sky research from this panel? For Demis, you want to say?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think it's absolutely key, and that's what all these new, we see now the flourishing of more like 20 years of basic research in AI, at least, which has led to the modern machine learning boom. 10 years of that in academia before it became into what we see today in industry, and I think that's the common path.
Yes.
It's critical.
Yes. So, wonderful. I'm sure we can actually go out and go on and continue this discussion. Sadly, without you, but I hope you got some ideas, some inspiration, and I want to thank our wonderful panel here. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Well, let's leave now. We can come back.
Thank you, Vera.
Do we stay?
So you two, I'm keeping on stage. No, we keep them. We know we stay. Keep the chairs. It's fine. It's good. We keep them. Yeah. Take a seat. Little bit of stage management here. May I invite Maria Ressa and Alexandra Matvichuk back on stage also, please?
I'll go over here.
Thank you so much. And so we just thought we'd reunite you for a quick end session. And there's no particular remit for this session. It's more a reflections on what you've heard, what's been talked about this evening. I just wanted to start, though, by turning to the two science laureates. You've spoken beautifully in that last session, but you are both fundamental scientists. Paul, you discovered the mechanisms of the cell cycle. Ben, you made molecular machines using nanochemistry. It might not be immediately obvious to the audience what the connection is between science and democracy. But I know that you have strong feelings on this. Can you very briefly tell us why the two are connected?
Maybe I start. Science is critical for democracy. Science fundamentally is the pursuit of truth. Democracy is built on truth and trust. Science provides a trusted way at generating knowledge. It's critical for the democratic process. And not only that, science is influencing society increasingly as generations go on, and we have to produce democratic institutions and ways of working that can accommodate and take on board the complexities of science. I'm not sure we got there yet, but we have to do it.
Thank you. Ben, do you want to add to that?
Democracy, as far as I see it, crucial elements are freedom and asking questions and being critical. And this is exactly what science does. When I discuss with my students, when I do research with my group, with my team from all over the world in the laboratories, etc., we ask questions. Yeah? And we stimulate them to ask questions. We have the freedom to be critical. And we have the freedom to explore. And thanks to the European Research Council grants, which supports blue sky research. No, serious. This is one of the best things that happened to Europe, because this is the way to give the freedom to our young talents at the universities and high schools and whatever, to explore, to discover, to use their talents. And we will need it for the future, to build the sustainable world, the sustainable society in 30, 40 years from now. It's a long-term goal. You cannot do this overnight. And so for me, democracy, this whole idea of freedom, free thinking, but also critical attitudes, that the student does not believe everything which is in the books of what my colleague professor says, you know? Be critical and train the people in this way. This is a great gift. We often forget that, of a free society, of a democratic society. This is, once again, I cannot emphasize enough, these young people is the next generation that will be the leaders in our countries, both politics, industry, sustainable society of the future.
Thank you. Maria, I know you wanted to reflect a little bit on the discussion on AI that's happened just now.
I loved listening, but you almost looked at it like you were users of it, right? And I'll throw out just a few things for you to think about. Again, I love technology. It may sound like I don't, but I think that we need more Vera Jourovas to make sure there are guardrails in place. So the first is, the computing industry today has a larger carbon footprint than the aviation industry. And when you add AI, that increases energy consumption by at least 2%. The pursuit of AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is to take everything and throw it in, right? Without anchoring it, without a knowledge graph anchoring it, without people training it, is speculative still, I would say, right? Because you're asking. So last year we spent $50 billion to invest in generative AI, in artificial general intelligence. We still don't have a use for it, but those small, focused, like AlphaFold, those are where things work, but they don't make us much money. Mm-hmm. You will not invest enough. So I would say, let's look at the business model again. And then the last one is not only critical thinking, but I worry when our students will use the chatbot to write. Writing is a skill. You learn to write by struggling to write. And if you throw away the struggle to write, can you really critically think?
You can respond to it. Funnily enough, I was watching this online, and I was watching the text that is generated alongside your words, and every time people said ChatGPT, those words were different. Sometimes it said Chatty Betty, sometimes it said Church PT. It tells a story. Right. Alexandra, I'd like to bring you in. What would you like to reflect on?
Probably I will say that if we want to save democracy and freedom in the world, it's obligation of everybody to practice democracy and freedom daily. And this means that sometimes we have to go beyond of the zone of comfort. Like people in Ukraine who now fighting just for a chance to build a country where the rights of everybody are protected, government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police do not beat students who are peacefully demonstrating like we have just 10 years ago when we had this authoritarian regime. So I also think that we have to support each other, because something which we face, this threat, can't be solved in national borders. When large-scale wars started, democracies told, let's help Ukraine not to fail. And Ukraine obtained the first weapons to be able to defend ourselves. First, real sanctions against Russia were introduced into force. And we are extremely grateful, because it's helped us to survive. But we must move further. We have to set ambitious goals. Let's help Ukraine to win. Because there is a huge difference between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win. Democracies must win wars because only spread of freedom make our world safer. The world needs success of Ukraine.
I'd like to add to that. I'm an ambassador for Ukraine Science and Education. I've visited Ukraine. I've been to schools that have been shelled and ruined by the war. I went into a classroom, and in the rubble, it was the art classroom, in the rubble was children's art mixed up with all the broken masonry. This is pathos. This is the barbarism of war. I found a painting done by a child of a mother holding a baby, surrounded by sunflowers, as you could imagine, there in the rubble. I took it home, I have it on my desk. This is the barbarism of autocracy versus democracy. Ukraine has to win, and we have to help Ukraine win.
What that means is a whole nother conversation, of course. Paul, I just wanted to dwell on one thing. You're an ambassador for science. You have a very hopeful message from the power of science to unite people, don't you? Where there are differences across nations which seem insurmountable, science sometimes bridges the gap, right?
I do. I think science has the power of diplomacy. It's perhaps not been fully recognized, where often more cultural activities have played that role. But science speaks with a common language across all nations. Science breaks down barriers, and even when it's difficult, it is possible to talk, particularly with discovery science, which is open and somehow beyond the politics. So when things get rough, you know, it can get China-US relations have degraded. This is dangerous. We can rebuild contacts through science. We mustn't turn that off because it's one door that can remain open. When the old Soviet Union, during the Cold War, the one thing that was connecting was in fact science. Difficult with Putin because such an autocrat doesn't even understand truth. But we do have to work on that. I really think science has an important diplomatic role, which will lead to increased peace.
Thank you. Ben, you wanted to comment, or just?
No, just I want to emphasize how important this is. Science has no borders, and there is a lot of talk about borders and fencing in and all these things. Science has no borders. Knowledge belongs to humanity all over the world. And as Louis Pasteur,
yeah.
let me quote Louis Pasteur, and this is an important message for all our people, and especially the young people. Louis Pasteur already said 150 years ago, knowledge and science and education is the torch that illuminates the world.
That would be a very good closing line, Ben, and perhaps we should stop now because we're out of time. But I just want to offer the chance for a last statement to Maria, and if you want to go again, Alexandra, please.
You know, on the science theme, yeah, I'll keep it short. Look, we have a world on fire right now. Aside from Ukraine, there is Gaza. We have divided generations, right? If you look at Gen Z, how Gen Z actually has decolonization narratives, takes it much more strongly, believes in it stronger than my generation. So there's that, and then you have the technology that is like the match that sets the whole thing on fire. We have never lived through anything like this in my lifetime. I'm 60 this year, last year. So, I guess I'll end it with science, right? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The very act of searching changes everything. The minute you go, so the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, you shoot an electron, a radioactive electron into a closed system to find the location of an electron. And then the only way you will find it is the ricochet of the radioactive electron. So you'll never know exactly where that electron is that you're finding. You'll only see when it's deflected, but when it's deflected, the electron moves.
Yeah.
That's the world of creation we live in today, and we must make it better. We must keep searching.
I
know, please.
Very short.
I don't know how historians in future will call this historical period, but we are used to live in very challenging time. The whole UN system of peace and security is collapsing before our eyes. This means that we will see fires, like wars, more and more often in different parts of the globe because the whole international system is faulty and sparks everywhere. And this means that in such challenging time, the role of ordinary people become more and more crucial because people can change the history quicker than the UN intervention.
Thank you very much, all of you. So that is it for the evening. I have a couple of things I'd like to do. First of all, I would like to thank the partners who make all of this possible. They are 3M, ABB, Capgemini, AQT, H2 Green Steel, and Scania. And also there's an event partner, Luminate, and all of them make this happen. I'd also like to extend special thanks to the Swedish Embassy in Belgium and the Swedish Ambassador, Annika Molin Helgren. I'd like to thank all our participants for so kindly coming all the way to Brussels and being part of this. Thank you. But I'd also particularly like to thank you, the audience, because you don't know what a difference you make, perhaps, but talking from stage to such an enormous, engaged crowd really elevates the conversation in an intangible way. And so your presence is also what makes the dialogue. Thank you all very much for being here.